They fear what you'll become once you awaken spiritually. Have you ever felt like there's more to life than what you've been told? Like there's something stirring deep within you, something ancient, silent, and powerful, trying to break free? You go through the motions, meet the expectations, chase the dreams handed to you by others, yet somehow, none of it feels real. You laugh, but it doesn't reach your soul. You work, but you don't feel fulfilled. You're surrounded by people, yet feel deeply alone. That haunting emptiness you can't explain, it isn't a flaw. It's a sign that your soul is awakening. You see, the world has done a remarkable job of putting you to sleep. From the moment you were born, you were handed labels, conditioned to believe in limits, taught to seek validation outside yourself. They gave you a name, a role, a box to live in, and you were expected to smile and stay there. But no matter how well you fit in, there was always a quiet rebellion inside you. A whisper that said, "This isn't who you are." And that whisper is getting louder. There's a reason for that. Because the time is coming, has already come, when you can no longer ignore your inner truth. Your soul can no longer be silenced. The awakening has begun, and it's not just personal, it's spiritual. You start to see through the illusions, the false identities, the empty pursuits, the invisible chains. You realize that the life you've been living wasn't truly yours. It was programmed, handed down, inherited from fear and survival. But now, you begin to remember. You begin to feel the divine spark within you. You begin to ask dangerous questions, the kind that unravel lies. Who am I really? Why am I here? What am I capable of, once I am no longer afraid? And that is where the fear begins, not yours, but theirs. Because when you awaken spiritually, you become something the world doesn't know how to handle. You become free. And a free soul cannot be manipulated, cannot be owned, cannot be used. You no longer serve their system. You no longer follow blindly. You step into your truth. And truth has always been feared by those who profit from lies. They don't fear your past. They don't fear who you were when you were asleep. They fear what you're becoming now that your eyes are open. They fear your voice, your presence, your clarity, your power. Because it reminds them of what they've given up. It exposes what they're still running from. It threatens the very structure of the false world they live in. So when you feel alone, misunderstood, rejected as you walk this spiritual path, remember this. It's not that you're doing something wrong. It's that you're doing something rare. You are awakening. And that, in itself, is a revolution. The sleeping giant within you. For most of your life, you've been asleep, and you didn't even know it. Not because you were lazy, not because you lacked intelligence, and not because you were weak, but because the world taught you how to sleep with your eyes wide open. From childhood, you were given rules to follow, ideals to worship, and fears to carry like a second skin. They taught you what to believe, who to become, and what to suppress within yourself to be accepted. And so, you became what they wanted, a version of you that was quiet, manageable, predictable, and blind to your own power. You were told not to question too much, not to feel too deeply, not to dream too wildly. You were told to follow the path, to check the boxes, to color inside the lines. You were told that your value comes from how others see you, not from who you truly are. And little by little, something inside you dimmed. The spark, the intuition, the sacred voice within, buried under the noise, under the pressure, under the masks you had to wear to survive. But what they didn't realize, what even you may not have realized, is that you were never truly broken. You were only dormant. You were a giant in slumber, not yet aware of your own strength. You see, the soul doesn't die in captivity, it waits. It waits for the moment you start to question the illusion. It waits for the day you grow tired of pretending. It waits for you to feel the unbearable weight of living someone else's life. And when that moment comes, when the pain of staying asleep becomes greater than the fear of waking up, everything changes. At first, it may come in whispers. A quiet discomfort when you engage in shallow conversations. A strange sadness when you achieve something you thought would make you happy. A sudden pull toward solitude, nature, or stillness. These are not signs of something wrong. They are signs of something right. They are the soul knocking from the inside, asking to be remembered. And when you begin to listen, even if you don't understand what's happening, a sacred process begins. The giant stirs, the illusion cracks, and you start to see, for the first time, that the life you've been living is not the life you were born for. You begin to sense that your existence has meaning beyond roles, titles, or possessions, that your suffering wasn't random. It was a compass, pointing you back to yourself, that your wounds were not the end of you. They were the birthplace of your awakening. And slowly, courage begins to grow. Not the kind of courage that charges into battle, but the quiet, unshakable kind. The kind that says, I will no longer live in denial of who I am. I will no longer betray my truth for the comfort of others. I will no longer shrink so that others don't feel small. And this shift is dangerous to those who prefer you sleeping. Because when you begin to awaken, you are no longer easy to manipulate. You are no longer addicted to approval. You are no longer desperate to fit into spaces that suffocate your spirit. You start saying no without apology. You start walking away from toxic cycles. You start choosing peace over performance and purpose over popularity. And people notice. Some become uncomfortable. Some grow distant. Some turn hostile. Not because you've wronged them, but because your light makes their shadows impossible to ignore. When the sleeping giant within you begins to rise, you carry a new presence. You don't have to shout. You don't have to prove. You simply exist in alignment, and that alone disrupts the unconscious. Your very being becomes a mirror to those still asleep, and what they see scares them. They see what they could be had they not chosen fear. They see the parts of themselves they've buried, and instead of awakening, they attack. Not because you're a threat to them, but because you're a threat to their illusion. And this is where many falter. This is where the newly awakened are tempted to retreat, to go back to sleep, to silence themselves once again, just to be accepted. But you must understand, this path isn't about pleasing others. It's about becoming who you were always meant to be. The giant inside you was not born to tiptoe through life, afraid of being seen. It was born to stand tall, rooted in truth, radiating the light of something eternal. You do not awaken just for yourself. You awaken for your lineage, your future, your purpose, your soul. You awaken because there is something in this world that only you can heal, something only you can build, something only you can carry forward. And make no mistake, the resistance you face as you rise is not a sign to stop. It is confirmation that you're on the right path. If no one fears your transformation, it means you haven't truly transformed. If no one questions your awakening, it means you're still dimming your light. So rise. Rise even when it feels lonely. Rise even when it feels terrifying. Rise even when they whisper behind your back or walk away without explanation. Because the sleeping giant within you is not just waking up, it's coming home. And when you finally step into the full magnitude of who you are, when you stop apologizing for your fire, when you no longer seek permission to be powerful, then, and only then, will you understand why they were afraid of what you'd become. Because once you awaken spiritually, you become unstoppable. And the world has never known what to do with someone it cannot control. The shift that changes everything. There is a moment in every spiritual awakening when everything you once thought was real begins to unravel. It doesn't happen with a loud announcement. It doesn't come with clear instructions. It arrives quietly, sometimes painfully, as a shift inside your soul. One day, the things that used to excite you no longer move you. The people you used to chase don't feel like home anymore. The dreams you once worshipped seem shallow. And you can't explain it. Not to your friends, not even to yourself. But something inside you knows the change has begun. This shift is not just emotional. It is energetic. You begin to detach, not out of anger, but out of clarity. The noise of the world that used to consume your thoughts starts to fade into the background. The opinions, the expectations, the performance, none of it holds the same weight. You start to crave truth more than attention. You seek solitude not because you're broken, but because the crowd no longer nourishes you. You no longer want to impress, you want to be free. It is here, in this sacred unraveling, that you realize how deeply you've been conditioned. Conditioned to chase instead of rest, to perform instead of feel, to obey instead of trust your intuition. You begin to notice how much of your life was built on fear. Fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of being alone. And in that awareness, you feel both heartbreak and liberation. Heartbreak for the years you lived half asleep. Liberation for the soul that is finally breathing. The shift changes your perception of everything. What once seemed like success now feels like a distraction. What once looked like security now feels like a prison. What once felt comfortable now feels unbearable. Because when your spirit starts to awaken, anything out of alignment begins to fall apart. And that is not a sign of failure. It is a sign of truth. The false must collapse to make room for the real. And yes, it will be confusing. It will be lonely. But it will also be the most honest you've ever felt. And as you change, your world begins to respond. Some people will pull away. Some will question you. Others will attack you. Not because you've harmed them, but because your shift threatens the story they've been living in. You no longer participate in gossip. You no longer seek drama. You stop pretending to be who you're not just to be accepted. And that authenticity makes people uncomfortable because it reminds them of everything they've suppressed in themselves. You'll notice that the more you awaken, the less you react. The more you observe, you see pain behind anger. You hear insecurity in arrogance. You recognize projection when people try to shame you. And instead of retaliating, you begin to rise above. Not because you're better, but because your spirit no longer wishes to fight battles that only ego can win. You start to move differently, less driven by fear, more guided by inner peace. That peace becomes your compass. And though it won't always be easy to follow, you'll know when you're in alignment. Your body will relax. Your energy will feel clean. Your presence will speak louder than your words. You'll begin to attract experiences, people, and opportunities that reflect who you are becoming, not who you used to be. You'll learn to release what no longer serves you, not with bitterness, but with grace. Because you understand now that every ending is also a beginning. This shift is sacred. It's not a trend. It's not a phase. It's not something to be rushed or explained away. It is the shedding of false layers, the death of the ego's grip, the return to your original self, the one that existed before the world told you who to be. And yes, it will feel like chaos at times. You'll question your path. You'll lose things that once felt important. You'll face resistance from the very people who once claimed to love you. But don't mistake that resistance for failure. It is evidence that the system you're breaking away from can no longer hold you. The shift that changes everything is not just about escaping pain. It's about stepping into power. Real power. Not the kind that dominates others, but the kind that comes from alignment with your soul. The kind that cannot be bought, manipulated, or destroyed. The kind that radiates from a quiet knowing. I am who I am, and that is enough. And this new version of you, the one who no longer tolerates lies, who no longer begs for crumbs, who no longer trades authenticity for acceptance, that version is feared. Not because it's violent or rebellious, but because it is sovereign. Because you are no longer easily influenced. Because you've unplugged from the script and started writing your own story. So when the shift happens, and it will, don't resist it. Don't numb it. Don't run from it. Embrace it. Because what feels like loss is often just clarity. What feels like chaos is often divine order reshaping your life. And what feels like the end of who you were is actually the beginning of who you were always meant to be. This is the point of no return. The moment where you stop living for appearances and start living from your essence. And the more deeply you embrace the shift, the more clearly you will see who is truly for you, and who is only attached to the version of you that served their comfort. The world may not applaud this transformation. It may not reward it, but your soul will. Your spirit will rise in quiet victory, knowing that you chose truth over convenience, that you chose yourself over the illusion, that you chose to wake up no matter the cost. And that, my friend, changes everything. Why they fear your awakening. You might wonder, why would anyone fear your awakening? Why would people turn away from someone who is simply becoming more self-aware, more loving, more connected to truth? Shouldn't growth be celebrated? Shouldn't healing be admired? But the reality is this. Spiritual awakening threatens every illusion that people have built their lives around. And most people aren't ready to watch their illusions collapse. They fear your awakening because it reflects what they have been unwilling to face within themselves. When you rise, you become a mirror, not the kind that flatters, but the kind that exposes. You remind them of their own compromises, the truths they've buried, and the power they've abandoned. You reflect the life they could have lived if they had chosen courage over comfort. And rather than confront that discomfort, it's easier for them to blame you, to shame you, to distance themselves from the light you carry. They fear your clarity, because clarity is contagious. When one person in a relationship, whether it's family, friendship, or partnership, begins to awaken, It forces the other to either evolve or exit. And most people would rather escape than evolve. Your clarity makes them question everything they've normalized: toxic patterns, empty rituals, false beliefs. It shakes the ground beneath the roles they've played. And in that shaking, they feel exposed, unsteady, and afraid. They fear your freedom. You're no longer driven by people-pleasing, no longer dancing for their validation, no longer willing to lie to yourself just to keep the peace. You set boundaries. You speak truth. You walk away from environments that drain you. And that makes people uncomfortable because it reminds them of the chains they still wear. You've stopped performing, but they haven't, and they resent you for it. They fear your silence. Because now, you no longer argue to prove yourself. You no longer over-explain. You no longer beg to be understood. Your stillness, your refusal to engage in drama, your calm refusal to participate in dysfunction, it's not weakness, it's power. And it unsettles them. Because they relied on your reactions to maintain control. They fed off your doubt. They felt stronger when you felt small. But now, you've reclaimed your center. And they no longer know how to reach you. They fear your discernment. Because when you awaken, you stop falling for masks. You start seeing through smiles that hide manipulation, through compliments that come with strings, through love that's laced with control. You stop giving your energy to those who haven't earned it. You stop explaining your worth. You become unavailable to games, guilt, and gaslighting. And that terrifies people who use to manipulate you with ease. They fear your transformation because it's irreversible. Once you've seen the truth, you can't unsee it. Once you've tasted freedom, you can't go back to begging. Once you've experienced inner peace, chaos no longer excites you. And that's what they hate most: your refusal to go back to sleep. Your refusal to shrink. Your refusal to pretend. But here's the deeper truth. They don't fear you. They fear what you represent. They fear the possibility that if you can change, they can too. But that would mean taking responsibility. And responsibility is heavy. It means admitting they've been wrong. It means letting go of the ego's illusions. It means doing the inner work. And many would rather stay in suffering than do that. Your awakening reveals how much they've settled. It calls out their avoidance. It interrupts the comfortable patterns they've been living in for years. And so, they attack. Not with fists, but with silence. Not with honesty, but with distance. They may mock your new values. Roll their eyes at your peace. Accuse you of being too serious, too sensitive, too deep. But those are just words people use when they're too afraid to meet you where you've gone. You see, when people can no longer control your mind, they try to control how others see you. They spread rumors. They twist your growth into selfishness. They portray your boundaries as betrayal. But don't be deceived. Their narrative isn't the truth. It's their reaction to losing the version of you that was easy to use. And what you must remember is this: their discomfort is not your responsibility. Your only responsibility is to remain true. To keep choosing light even when darkness pushes back. To keep walking in integrity even when you are misjudged. To keep growing, even if it means growing alone. Because the cost of staying small is far greater than the pain of being misunderstood. They fear your awakening because they've never seen someone walk in truth and not crumble. But you won't crumble. You will rise. You will shine. You will continue forward, not in arrogance, but in alignment. Not to prove anything, but because you can no longer be anything less than real. And eventually, some of those who fear you now will thank you silently. Because your courage planted a seed. Your transformation gave them permission. Your authenticity stirred something in them that they couldn't ignore forever. You see, sometimes the awakened ones are not here to be loved. They are here to be lightning. And lightning, while terrifying, always brings clarity. So let them fear. Let them misunderstand. Let them walk away. Because you're not here to be digestible. You're here to be divine. And divinity has never needed approval to exist. The power of the awakened soul. There is a quiet, undeniable power that comes when a soul fully awakens. It is not loud. It is not aggressive. It does not demand attention. And yet, it shifts the atmosphere of every room it enters. It doesn't beg to be seen, because it already sees itself. It doesn't ask for permission, because it has already been appointed. This is the power that emerges when you've passed through the fires of rejection, confusion, and inner transformation, and come out with your truth intact. The awakened soul does not seek to dominate. It seeks to align. It no longer needs to argue, prove, or convert. It stands in what it knows, rooted and unshakable. You don't walk faster, you walk deeper. You speak less, but every word carries weight. And those who once tried to control you, they sense it. They feel the difference, even if they can't explain it. You've become someone they can't define, someone they can't manipulate, someone they can't silence. When your soul awakens, your life begins to flow, not without challenges, but with clarity. The confusion fades. The anxiety quiets. The endless chasing stops. You become more deliberate, more focused, more free. You understand that not everything deserves your energy. Not every invitation deserves your yes. You stop trying to fix what was never yours to heal. You stop trying to be understood by those committed to misunderstanding you. You start living for something higher, something eternal, something sacred. This is what they fear most. Because awakened souls are no longer afraid to stand alone. They are no longer dependent on the crowd to validate their worth. They no longer serve the systems that thrive on fear, shame, and guilt. They walk in divine authority, not because of who they are, but because of what they remember, that they were never just flesh and bone, but spirit and light. That they came here not to conform, but to awaken others simply by being awake themselves. And when you carry this kind of energy, it creates a ripple. Your very presence disrupts old patterns. Your words plant seeds in people's minds that they can't unhear. Your peace becomes a protest. Your joy becomes rebellion. You challenge the status quo without trying to. Because the awakened soul is a threat, not through violence, but through vibration. Not through force, but through frequency. And perhaps that is the greatest irony. They feared your awakening because they assumed it would make you arrogant, unpredictable, dangerous. But instead, it made you kind. It made you clear. It made you compassionate, honest, and full of light. The true awakened soul does not wish to dominate, but to liberate. It does not seek vengeance, but truth. It does not cling to identity, but lives through essence. This is why your journey mattered. This is why every lonely night, every misunderstood moment, every tear, and every detour was necessary. Because now, you are not just aware, you are anchored. You are not just informed, you are transformed. You are not just awake, you are fully alive. And in this state, no weapon formed against you can truly prosper, because nothing outside of you defines you anymore. Not their opinions, not your past, not even your fears. You've outgrown the cage. You've broken the spell. You've remembered the original power within you, the one that cannot be bought, broken, or buried. And now, you walk with purpose. You love with discernment. You give without attachment. You speak with fire, but walk in grace. You understand that your awakening was never about separating from the world, but about seeing it clearly, so you can love it rightly. This is the paradox of spiritual power. It makes you both warrior and healer, silent and loud, still and moving. You are no longer afraid of what they think, because you've seen what they cannot see. You are no longer threatened by the unknown, because the unknown has become your teacher. You do not worship comfort, you honor truth. Even when it costs you, especially when it costs you. And now, the fear they once had toward you no longer matters. Because you no longer need their approval. You no longer bend to their expectations. You've walked through the fire, and it did not consume you. It refined you. It awakened you to your mission, your voice, your soul. So keep walking in that power. Let them wonder how you're still standing. Let them whisper about your peace. Let them fear your freedom. Because your life is the evidence that awakening is possible. That power does not always look like dominance, but often like quiet, unstoppable conviction. And in a world built on illusion, nothing is more dangerous than a soul who sees clearly. This is who you are now. And this is what they feared all along. Not your weakness, but your strength. Not your past, but your potential. Not your failure, but your rising. Because the awakened soul doesn't just change. It transforms everything it touches. And once you walk in that, there is no going back. You were never meant to fit in. You were meant to awaken. And now that you have, let the world feel it.